With 30-odd days to go until Article 50 is triggered, officially taking the UK out of the European Union, will it be delayed? Will the remaining EU members allow any delay? If that comes to pass, will the UK leave with no agreement in place, or will both sides acquiesce and come together in an arrangement that suits both parties? Well, John Rowland joins us now from consultancy group Cicero. John, welcome.
Good morning.
We've spoken to you before about your opinions on Brexit. You deal a lot, I know, with a lot of city clients. Explain where you think the leaning is at the moment in terms of the pendulum between soft and hard.
We are on the harder end of Brexit at the moment. I think the softer options have more or less been taken off the table for now. There still hasn't been this upswell of support for a second referendum or anything that can turn over the result. Nick Boles tried to put a Norway plus option in front of, which is a sort of single market plus customs union option in front of Parliament. That doesn't seem to have gained any momentum. So what we're left with is this choice between, at the moment, Theresa May's deal and no deal. And no deal is the hardest Brexit you can have. And Theresa May's deal, let's not forget, it is actually a fairly independent version of the UK compared to some of the predictions maybe 18 months or 2 years ago.
Yeah, so this takes it then to this hard end if indeed we don't even end up with perhaps maybe no deal. But we were threatened originally with mass fallout from a number of different areas, including 250,000 jobs potentially going from the city. We're not seeing anything like that, even as we edge towards that harder end.
Well, on the city side, we haven't seen that exodus of jobs. There's been some reallocation of capital, there have been some moves of jobs, some investment decisions have changed, but there's also been a lot of firms that have committed in some way to the future of the City of London. That's because the City of London is a big network, it's a huge organism, as it were. I think where you are seeing some difference is in anything that has a physical supply chain, because then you're more reliant on physical checks, on tariffs, and where there has been greater uncertainty on that side, I think there has been more questioning of what the UK's relationship in relation to the EU is. And we've also had some regulatory comfort since then on the city side. For example, CCPs, these central counterparties, will be recognised, and there's now an open question about that, whether that'll happen on stock exchanges, for example.
So do you think that perhaps maybe, despite the fact we are swinging towards the harder end, that deep down you think that the parties will acquiesce, there will be some sort of deal, there will be some sort of meeting of minds ultimately, and that from both sides? We've heard a lot about the fact that the EU is not going to move, but the EU has a reputation at the 11th hour of moving.
Well, that's right. I mean, both sides are dug in at the moment. And Theresa May is in a very, very challenging position because she cannot build a majority unless she gets something substantial on the backstop, and yet the Irish government is saying we cannot, and is dug in so deeply on the backstop that it feels like it can't give anything within the withdrawal agreement without showing failure on its side. What the open question is there somewhere between these two which allows the ERG in particular to get in behind Theresa May and for her to have a chance of building a majority without Leo Varadkar's government collapsing in Ireland? So you've got two governments in a very difficult place, and then the rest of the EU member states who are wondering whether there is a way you can plot a position between these. At the moment, Theresa May has just spoken to Juncker and may be going to Egypt this weekend to continue talking. The two sides, the UK side is putting quite a glossy spin on it, saying we're still talking, options are on the table, but if there is going to be something substantive on the backstop, it means moving away from where the Irish have been, which is that this is really a non-negotiable point. There can't be a time limit, there can't be an exit mechanism.
I know you're not a foreign exchange analyst or anybody that analyses the stock markets directly, but to my mind, someone that follows the markets, we're not down as far as perhaps maybe some of the real scaremongers had expected Sterling to go and the FTSE. But what I want to know is from you is whether or not you think perhaps maybe we're building up to a repeat of the Y2K, the real fears that had come through from the movement from 1999 into 2000. Do you think that ultimately we actually might end up finding that capital is indeed like water, and it passes through into places you wouldn't necessarily expect it to have done ultimately, and we'll all be all right?
Well, there are a lot of people, a lot of very clever people that have put a lot of resources into preparing for no deal in the City of London. A lot of my clients are ready to go, whether it's one way or another.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we've just heard from Michael Gove saying to Philip Hammond as the Chancellor that no preparations have been made for no deal, or very few preparations.
On the side of the government, that might be true, but from the perspective of the commercial organisations, they have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders and, of course, to their clients to be ready for this. I can't speak for every firm in the City of London, but a lot of them have made their preparations. So if they're reliant on passporting, they've set up entities in the EU, or they're thinking about whether they're moving client accounts or repapering contracts and that kind of thing. So that's what's going on. I think for people, as I mentioned earlier on, with physical supply chains, that's a much more challenging thing to plan for, because you are totally reliant on the government in many ways to facilitate the free movement of those goods.
I just want as well your comment on this reports in the Financial Times recently suggesting that some of the European fund managers might actually end up having to move to London for a number of different reasons, not least of which they didn't really want to trade stocks on, or can't trade stocks on, two different exchanges, would rather come to London because it's more liquid. Ultimately, this actually turns everything on its head about the whole services industry and the fact that the EU were threatening the city with, you know, this mass exodus and so forth. Now it seems that potentially we could well see the flow coming the other way.
Well, I think these people are very level-headed. They're not political. What do they want? They want the lowest price, the best execution, the most market liquidity, so that they've got the best margins for themselves and for their clients. That's an obvious thing to say. So they will do what is necessary in order to achieve that. So if the regulators are fragmenting the market, they will just do what they have to try and get around that. And that could end up with a net negative effect for everybody, because it's just more costly and more complicated. But people will plan, and what I think most people in the city, their message would be for the regulators to get on and agree this, as they recognise the equivalents of, you know, US or Hong Kong exchanges, to say, well, UK exchanges are exactly the same, except we've been in the EEA for a long time. But this is political. This is tied up in the politics of the overall negotiation, and it will require the regulators, when they've got the nod, to move probably at a late stage, I would say.
So far as Cicero Group is concerned, one final question about the way in which you're approaching all this. Has what has happened recently changed your view on where Cicero is going to be based, what your relationship is with clients and so forth across Europe?
London is our home, and most of our clients are based here in London. If we were to see a very large movement of firms out of London into other EU markets, then we would think about following that. But we have a Brussels base and we have a Dublin base, so we feel that we're sufficiently hedged against that already. But this is at its heart a London-based company, and this is where our heart is.
Yeah. Look, okay, John, it's been a pleasure. Thanks indeed.
Thank you
for joining us. John Rowland there from the consultancy firm Cicero Group.